Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the concluding ceremony for the event. It has been intensive 2 days, but fruitful, productive, and wonderful. And today we are here to conclude our event. We have learned a lot through this conference, and I'm very glad that I still see so many people stayed behind to attend the closing ceremony. I'm not sure how it feels to you, but I feel that I have just stepped up here to do the opening ceremony. I feel that the conference was really over in a blink. I'm Dr. Safa Riaz, and on behalf of Bahria Business School, I warmly acknowledge and appreciate all of our guests and participants for being a part of this conference. Let us start with the proper program now. To formally start the ceremony, I will invite Mr. Munif Shahid from Islamic Studies Department, Bahria University, for the recitation of Holy Quran.
أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين كذلك الذي يضع اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم الذين يراءون ويمنعون الماعون. Have you observed a person who denies the essence of religion? He does not care to provide shelter to the orphans, nor is he committed to feeding the poor. Woe to the worshippers who like to show off in their prayers and stop people from acquiring basic necessities to run a household.
Jazakallah. Now, I request you all to please rise for National Anthem of Pakistan. Thank you, everyone. Please take your seats now. Ladies and gentlemen, As chief guest of the event today, we have Sardar Yasir Ilyas, CEO Centaurus. He is also a former president of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He has done Masters in Business Administration from Kingston University, London. He is a young and dynamic leader who is actively involved in diversified business activities, having a vast array of experience in developing renowned projects around Pakistan and the Middle East, including retail, hospitality management, residential and commercial ventures. To contribute towards the social cause of Pakistan, he also initiated the corona vaccination drive through door-to-door camps established free of charge across Islamabad. Your presence with us is highly acknowledged, sir. Now, it is my humble request to the conference convener, Professor Dr. Muhammad Naveed, Dean Management Sciences and Principal, Bahria Business School, to please come on stage to give a conference overview. Professor Dr. Muhammad Naveed.
Once again. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Starting with the deep sense of the gratitude and the gesture of the thanksgiving to the Almighty. Then I could find out the very distinguished faces. They have the representation from the international fronts. We have the reps from the industry. We have the reps from the development sector. And I could find out the very distinguished faculty and very similar researchers. Looking into the significance of the global platforms, these international events, we always think about on the closing day, what should be your expectations? Your expectations from the global as well as the national, international platforms, that would be, what is the takeaway? What was the need of that event? We need to validate that need. Then we need to come up with the mindset of the future directions that we need to set on the basis of the takeaways which are associated with these international platforms. So before I would be very insightful towards the takeaways, I want to give a very quick, the preface, a quick purview of the international event that is being organized very successfully by the Knowledge Planet that is being named the Bahria University. Straight away, the keynote addresses that we received from a very distinguished, the participants that we have from the international fronts, they are highlighting the 4 important areas. We are living in the digital age today, so you have to believe in the global connectivity. The biggest investment that on the part of the European Union, we give it a name. This is Euro 2020. This is a European flagship. What is the amazing part of this? The flagship, the huge investment in the history by the European Union. This investment that is in 3 areas of the development side of their nation building. The first part that was addressing how we can open to the change. The second strand that addressing the needs, that how we can open to the data. The most important thing, how we can open to the world. Now we have to acknowledge this digital age with the adaptability, with the acceptance. The second most important thing on the part of the significance that we receive from the intellectual discourse of the keynotes. That was a need of the adaptability of the fintech. We are living in the age of the innovations. What you seek is seeking you. So this is a matter of the adaptability. This is a matter of the acceptance of that change. So the significance part, that is the adaptability. That is the adaptability of the fintech, the financial technology. The moving forward, we need to find out in a very close liaison when we have the eye on the developments that is taking place in the development sectors, in the corporate side, we need to find out there is a huge gap that is going on. What is the latency? What is the needs? What are the competencies that is being desirable by the industry? And what is the acquisition? What are the skill sets that we are fostering as the research institutions, we are fostering as the HEIs? So coming up with the three important strands: global connectivity, this is a need of time, but it should be on the basis of the obstinate base. The base is you need to develop your digital ecosystem. You need to develop the mindset which is going to have the acceptance of the digital skills. And the most important thing, we have to bridge this gap. The gap that we have between the needs of the industry and what the acquisition of the skills, what the acquisition of the knowledge that we are associating as the HEIs. A very unique part of this international conference, we are addressing the contemporary needs and the issues which are associated with the organizations in the developing economies during the pandemic era. So from the significance of the emerging age, we could find there is a rapid change in the technological advancements of the life. These emerging technologies, they have a very close liaison with our interface as a researcher, your interface as the instructor when we have the discourse with the students. That is the blended education. So the unique part of this international conference, that was the panel discussions that we have invited, addressing the two important strengths of the life in this new age: emerging technologies and the acceptability and the readiness towards the blended education. The key takeaway from this, a thought forum, I would say, that was addressing the realization of the analytics. This is the need of time. We are living in the data mines today. You have to give the meaning to this data. You call it, it's a data, it's information. The timely information coming up with the sense of the predictability, we can help our industry, we can help the government of your times in the improvement of your decision making. If information that would remains in the minds, that is not in the use of the economic and the financial users of the country. So believe me, we are working like the accountants, we are not working as the analysts. So we have to bring this change. This innovation in the classrooms, this innovation in the HEIs is more important towards the acceptability. So we have to accept this part very closely. We are data driven today, and we have to thrive very successfully with the sense of the data analyst. If I move forward, we have more than the 10 parallel sessions. They have engaged the research thoughts of the researchers from the different universities. We have the PhD colloquium, and the most important thing, every strand of the discussions that was associated with some takeaway. So on the basis of these colloquiums, on the basis of the panel discussions, on the basis of these collective wisdom, I would say. So what is the roadmap? What is the futuristic dialogues that we are going to adapt for the future resolutions? They bring across the three important areas. We are all set today to have a very close eye on the new academic progressions that is taking the form of the business analytics. This is the need of time. So we have to be among the first, the new movers. We have to take this initiative. We have to get the cultivation that is associated with the strength of the predictive modeling. The second most important thing, that is, what is the outcome of the research? So these platforms, these symposiums, they give you the latency, they give you the advancements, they give you what are the niche areas of the research, they are very close to the needs of the industry. So the need of time is, we have to map the research on the two sides. One is, we need to find out the niche areas, we need to find out the advancements, they are coming from the lens of the industry, and that have a very close liaison with what is being desirable by the World Economic Forum at the time. how your research is adding towards the economic vision of the country, how your research is going very close to the SDGs, MDGs. What is the roadmap that we are going to establish with the planning commission of the country? So from that point of view, on the one side, we have to bring our research at par with the needs of the industry. And the second mapping is more important. Once we have the accomplishment of the research, now you have to realize your research is coming close to the economic reality. So this is only possible when the outcome of your research in the form of the working papers, in the form of the policy papers that have to be into the hands of the policy making institutions, that is into the hands of the economic and financial users. So looking into all these perspectives, we have decided that we have to establish special interest groups to capture the needs of the industry, to capture the latency of these, the pedagogy, and the most important thing, that is the use of the research. If I'm looking into this, the successions that we claim, it was not possible without having the contribution of the strategic minds of the university. The support offices are there. So I would request to every one of you, please extend a very warm amount of the acknowledgement and the appreciations to the minds behind. I would name it special acknowledgement to the media team. Please put your hands together. My special thanks and sheer acknowledgement to the marketing, to the IT department, the faculty, but at the same time, we need to find out the strategic apex of the university, the worthy rector, the pro-rectors, director generals. If we start clapping with the one finger, it's not going to have the loud impact. So it's a team effort. So with this belief, so I would engage the thoughts of the event secretary. So we move forward. So end of the day, we are going with this realization that we are going to have the outcome that is adding a value towards the knowledge creation on the one side, but at the same time, it's adding some socio-economic development for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the conference overview. For our first keynote speech today, we have Dr. Barbara Stepien from Jagiellonian University, Poland. University in Krakow, Poland. Since 2019, Barbara has also been a professor at the Ibero-American University, a visiting professor at the Academy of Human Rights in Saltillo, Mexico. Moreover, she has been an invited professor during several international congresses and lectures in Brazil, Mexico, Colombia, and Poland. Barbara has also a maritime experience, and she is a professional yacht captain with more than 30,000 nautical miles of experience, including crossing the Atlantic Ocean and the equator. She links her professional maritime experience with legal research on the law of the sea and international maritime law. Dr. Barbara Stepien.
Honorable university authorities, guests of honor, estimated colleagues, public, salam alaikum. It's a great honor for me to have a pleasure to close this wonderful conference. Initially, I arrived to Pakistan, to Bahria University, for 1 week winter school on maritime law. I liked it so much that I decided to stay for almost 3 weeks. It's been really wonderful. And today I would like to talk a bit about the maritime business and more precisely about the autonomous shipping as a new strategic direction for the post-pandemic reality. And as we know, the last 2 years heavily affected all branches of business. And to put a bit of context, or not, to put a bit of context, I need to actually first tell you how was it and what happened during 2021 at sea. So very often we don't realize it, but actually all of us, every single person who is today with us, every person from the public, from our honorable guests, honorable university authorities, every one of us is heavily dependent on maritime transportation. So more than 80, almost 90% of merchandise, basically every product we can buy at a store, we acquire through maritime transport. Therefore, even though the COVID pandemic outbroke at the beginning of 2020, the maritime transport simply could have not stopped working. And this was very important because in September 2020, so we take September 2020 as a reference point because this is exactly several months after the lockdowns, after the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. At that point, 1 million seafarers were working without any break, still on maritime vessels all around the world. So this means that they did not stop. There was no lockdown, there was no remote work, there was no home office for the seafarers. So as a result of the pandemic and as a result of the crisis, crew exchanges got suspended. The travel restrictions immediately imposed by the majority of world countries basically made approximately 400,000 seafarers to be stuck at sea, stuck at the boards of the ships all around the world, and they could simply not return home. In such a way, we just got a humanitarian crisis at sea, and even though we could hear and listen in the radio, in TV, that the main forefront of the crisis were the medical services, police, in some countries military officers. Of course, we appreciate their work a lot, but we completely forgot and we completely neglected actually the seafarers who were just the core of the maritime transport, and thanks to them, during the full COVID pandemic worldwide, we were able to still acquire every basic product, including the face masks, gels, and medicines. So it was actually until the end of 2020, until the international community and the individual countries started recognizing seafarers as key workers, and therefore they slowly started getting exemptions from the travel restrictions. But until today, actually they became, and they remain invisible victims and silent heroes of the last 2 years. And this is just the context of what happened during the last 2 years, and this, what happened actually generates a very important question: how this situation could be prevented in the future. So as a part of my bigger research, my research project, Autonomous and Unmanned Vessels in International Law, Yara Birkeland as a Challenge to the Law of the Sea, I also analyzed the impact exactly of the COVID pandemic on maritime business. I also analyzed how we could react next time in order to prevent the humanitarian crisis at sea. So one of the answers for this type of the situations in the future could be exactly the autonomous and unmanned vessels. And one of the projects, Norwegians say that this is actually the first one, Yara Birkeland, is actually already ready for the operation. Yara Birkeland, which you can see on the screen, this is perhaps, according to her producers, the first autonomous, so far partially unmanned to be fully unmanned vessel, which is going to operate across the territorial sea of Norway. And because of lots of legal problems, Yara so far cannot be engaged in the international maritime transportation. However, this is already happening. Therefore, this, what I'm going to tell you today, this is actually not a theoretical discussion. These vessels already exist, and they stipulate a very interesting perspective for business, for developing countries, and of course, for the full maritime industry. So the concept of autonomous and unmanned vessels is actually very broad. Until still 1 year ago, we didn't even have a concrete legal or nautical definition of an autonomous and unmanned vessel. But lately, the IMO Maritime Safety Committee developed a definition of a maritime autonomous surface ship, which is a ship which to a varying degree can operate with or without or very reduced presence of human on board. And as a result, IMO distinguishes 4 levels, 4 different categories of autonomous and unmanned vessels. And as you can see on the screen, this is very basic division, we can say. I'm sure that if we have in the room today with us experts in the maritime transportation, if we have engineers, if we have IT programmers, of course, most likely you laugh about this legal division developed by the organization. But, of course, for the perspective and for the purpose of legal research, for the business and management, this is more than enough. So, of course, you see, we can have a ship with automated processes and decision support, remotely controlled ships with seafarers on board, remotely controlled ships without seafarers on board, and fully autonomous ship. So, very often, just for the future considerations, autonomy, it's not a synonym of manning or unmanning. One thing is the operational autonomy of a vessel. Second thing is actually if there is a human being on board or not. And a combination of both factors allow us to establish a level of category of a vessel which is going to be discussed today. So, important information for the business. Currently, it is estimated that the autonomous ships market values approximately $85 billion in 2020 and is estimated to reach almost double, $165 billion by the end of 2030, so during basically 8 years. Therefore, you may see that this is a strongly, heavily developing business which generates lots of business opportunities. And the main market segments, actually, we can distinguish, we can divide by component, and here we talk about the hardware and software, because as you may imagine, if we talk about a ship which has no or very reduced human presence on board, this means that we need very well-developed, very complex system which is going to operate this vessel. Therefore, by component, hardware, software, by level of autonomy, is it going to be a fully autonomous vessel? Is it going to be semi-autonomous? Or maybe no autonomy at all. There is fully remotely controlled vessel, thus unmanned, however, with a zero level of autonomy. By fuel type, one of the benefits of employing autonomous unmanned vessel as presented by their producers, as presented by their developers, is actually the eco-friendly characteristic of them. So, for example, Yara Birkeland, which is the Norwegian project, as I mentioned before, is already zero CO2 emission. It's an eco-friendly green vessel, fully electric. But of course, we could still think about the unmanned or autonomous vessels being, for example, fueled by the crude oil or other sources of fuel or energy. Ship type, so cargo, passengers, or military, also important. Currently, basically, we don't talk about autonomous or unmanned vessels in the context of passenger transportation. This idea that we could have a vessel without human presence on board, without any crew members, is still such complicated to understand that the legislators, nor engineers, nor the business really is not planning to employ autonomous or unmanned vessels for the transportations of passengers, tourists within feasible future. However, for the purposes of cargo transportation, for the purposes of military operations, of course, autonomous or unmanned, or following the IMO definition, mass vessels, of course, it's a very good idea. And this is already happening. By region, of course, different regions in the world are more or less, depending on a situation, active in the development of autonomous and unmanned vessels. So, pros and cons of mass for the industry. Definitely the main pluses, the main advantages of the maritime autonomous surface ships are the improved working conditions. Given the fact that we will have reduced or basically lack of any human presence on board, of course their working conditions will improve. Of course seafarers will not gonna spend anymore long hours, long shifts, doing overnights, not seeing their families for several months, sometimes up to a year, as it was in the case, for example, of the COVID crisis in 2020-2021. Reduced accidents-related costs. This is an advantage, and as you are going to see on the following screen, it's also a disadvantage. Why? Because main factor which causes maritime accidents is actually a human factor. So statistical data indicate that human errors are the main reasons for maritime accidents, and actually analyzing in deeper, the fatigue of seafarers causes the 80% of maritime accidents related to human errors. Therefore, of course, if we remove human errors from the equation, of course, suddenly we'll have a much less accidents at the worldwide scale. So perhaps the autonomy, the unmanning, could be a very good solution in order to avoid these accidents. Lower crew costs. So as mentioned before, if there is no crew, we have less employees, we have less workers, so probably it will also diminish the costs related to the hiring of crew members by the companies. Lower structural costs, similar, and better environmental performance, of course, if we talk about the eco-friendly, zero-emission, for example, ships. On the other hand, of course, as always, we have the minuses, we have cons, we have possible problems, disadvantages, technical system problems during voyages. As every new system, as every new idea, as every new technological solution, mass vessels, autonomous and unmanned vessels, they are going at the beginning causing lots of problems. We will have system which will be failing, we'll have bugs in the system, there will be still lots of technical issues to solve, and perhaps it will take us several years until a proper, almost without any failure or bugs, systems and technical solutions will be developed. More advanced IT systems and higher security. Exactly. Sometimes when I talk about the autonomous unmanned vessels, I get this question related to the possible hacking of the system. Are these ships gonna be safe? Do we gonna have firewalls? Are they gonna be subject to the attacks by hackers, terrorists, etc.? Of course, these questions are very important, and these questions must be also addressed by the developers of programs, of systems. This is a very important question for the business of IT, of the computers, to establish, develop, prepare, design such a system with such an architecture which is not gonna be vulnerable for the outside attacks. Is it possible? Well, we all know how is it with our private computers at home and how often we get some viruses just because of clicking on the wrong website. Port infrastructure, another problem. Currently, the ports all around the world are simply not prepared for receiving autonomous and unmanned vessels. So the full maritime business, maritime industry, global port operators, port facilities, everyone will need to start adjusting their facilities and their infrastructure in order to allow the autonomous and unmanned vessels to arrive to their ports. Shore-based management and shore-based remote control centers will need to be established. In case of unmanned vessels, we will need shore-based operator, so just someone sitting at home or in the center or in the office and operating 300-long cargo vessel on the other side of the world. Of course, still the international community, maritime business, still do not count with this type of solutions. Moreover, we will need to rethink the ages of maritime traditions. When I was for the first time, or one of the very first times, talking about the problems related to autonomous unmanned vessels in Colombia before the Maritime Academy in Colombia, it was very difficult to understand for the seafarers, for the militaries, that we can have a vessel without any crew members, without physical presence of a captain on board. And of course, regardless of the fact that every one of us understands it, of course we understand what it means that there is no captain on board of a vessel. This is just simply a revolutionary idea. So the full industry, the full maritime business will really need to go through a substantial change, substantial shift in the way of thinking. And perhaps, or most likely at the beginning, it will also be a strong obstacle for the business, for the development of this type of solutions. And finally, the regulatory barriers. So as I was saying, international law, law of the sea, international maritime law, are not prepared for this type of new technological solutions. And therefore, in 2018, IMO adopted a new strategic plan for the following 5 years, and included the integration of new and advancing technologies in the regulatory framework and indicated it as a new strategic direction for the development of the regulations and also of the maritime industry. And as the IMO already at that point realized that the international legal systems is the main obstacle at the moment for the business, for the industry, because it simply does not allow the autonomous and unmanned vessels to operate globally, the regulatory scoping exercise was undertaken in order to determine if and how and to which extent the international instruments, international conventions from the scope of the law of the sea and international maritime law, how much they need to be amended. Maybe we need new conventions, or maybe some of the conventions are gonna be able to receive this new type of vessels. Therefore, the IMO started to verify every single one convention just to see what needs to be done. So in last year, actually, the results were supposed to be delivered 1 year before, but the COVID outbroke. So with 1 year of delay, in 2020, the Maritime Safety Committee approved the results of this regulatory exercise, and as a result, it was determined how the international legal order must be amended and adjusted in order exactly to allow the business to start using this new modern type of vessels. And main concerns which business can see now, why still lots of companies is a bit reluctant to start employing this type of vessels. Regulatory barriers, number one. Of course, as long as legal regime is not adjusted, as long as the international law of the sea, maritime law, is not able to successfully receive this type of vessels, this is simply not going to happen. So this is the concern number one. This is why the ship operators, ship owners are still not very happy with the idea of changing their fleets and integrating this new innovatory type of vessels. Formalities. Every person who had any contact with the maritime industry, maritime business is aware how complicated are all the ships, vessels related formalities. So sometimes we think that it's difficult to get our car registered, that we need to fill some papers to get it registered or to get some annual checkup, for example. In case of vessels, it is much, much more complicated. Formalities to check and register the vessels are very complex, and it's very possible that in the case of autonomous unmanned vessels, it is going to be even more difficult. Additional safety and navigational requirements will need to be also fulfilled. And in this case, again, the maritime industry will need to face the higher, more complicated regime of adjusting their maritime security regulations to the present situation. Energy efficiency, important, very important concern for business and for the maritime industry. Normally, we measure the energy efficiency in terms of energy consumed per ton kilometer of freight moved. So now the question will be, are these eco-friendly electrical ships, for example, really more efficient regarding the consumed energy or not? It is still indicated that perhaps, at least at the beginning, they are not going to be more energy effective. So therefore, the ship owners and the ship operators may not be very happy with employing them. Traditionally, it's been also very common to invest in larger vessels in order to have the better benefits, business benefits. The bigger vessel, the more we can transport, the more money we can earn. Here, exactly because the vessels, autonomous unmanned vessels, are going to be also much more expensive at the beginning, this is also not so simple, and the business will really need to calculate it very well. And ports preparation. As long as the ports are not prepared, the business, the industry is just not going to start using them. So, as final reflections, autonomous shipping is definitely an answer for the environmental problems, for the crises, for situations like, for example, the COVID pandemic. However, the distinction between autonomy and manning or unmanning must be distinguished, must be realized. And the presence of a shore-based operator is also presupposed in 99% of the conversations or the ideas related to the autonomous shipping. A master and a crew stipulate a core of international maritime regulations. So I'm sure that as we are at the Maritime University, also all of you will agree with me that a vessel without a crew, without a captain, is simply not a vessel. So, as a consequence, employment of these new modern autonomous and unmanned vessels for the business, for the industry, will require really rethinking of ages of maritime traditions, standards, and customs. So, the MAS, or in other words, autonomous and unmanned vessels, can be a good business industry opportunity also for the developing states. When there is a new technology being introduced, when there are new ideas, when the market is still not saturated with lots of companies, this is always a good moment to start working on new projects or new technologies and to start developing this type of technological solutions. But the international maritime regime lacks the answers, lacks conventions, lacks regulations adjusted accordingly for the reception of this type of maritime vessels, and these answers need to be delivered soon, because as I started my presentation with, Yara Birkland is already there, she'll start to operate within the next few months, and the industry and the international community is still not prepared to receive it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stepien, for your insights. For our second keynote speech today, we have Ms. Joanne Paul. She is a lead advisor with Quality Education Development, QED, which is a long-established advisory company that supports business schools with continuous improvement, international accreditation, and leadership development, including AACSB. With QED, Joanne has worked with business schools across 6 continents. She is passionate about quality improvement and continuous development. Ms. Joanne Paul.
Salam alaikum. I'm going to be a little brave because today is actually a very important day for me. Not just because I'm here, but today is the 17th of March. And in Ireland, if I can get my clicker to work, the 17th of March is St. Patrick's Day. So I'm going to risk it, and I apologize for my Urdu pronunciation, but Senan Peter Kudin Bareku, kind of. And at home, St. Patrick's Day is a really national day of culture. It's a day for family, it's a day for parades, it's a day for celebration. And one of the things that's closely associated with St. Patrick's Day is the shamrock. So the shamrock is a small 3-leaved plant. And legend has it that when St. Patrick came to Ireland back in the 5th century, that he used the 3-leaved plant of the clover to actually explain the principles of Christianity. And this idea of the number 3 being symbolic is something that carries across many, many traditions and concepts. In literature, you have the 3 musketeers. If you're in France, you've got liberté, égalité, fraternité. They use 3 words. For fairy tales for children, I don't know if it's the same in Pakistan as in Ireland, but we have the 3 little pigs. We have Goldilocks and the 3 bears. But this idea of the number 3 carries throughout many aspects of culture and history and literature. And within QED, we've used this number 3 ourselves. We've distilled much of what we've done with business schools into 3 key principles. And what I'd like to do in the short time I have with you is to use those 3 principles to talk about the challenges of emerging economies, of blended learning, and of digitalization, and perhaps use these 3 principles, which we call principles of accreditation, but they're really principles of good practice, and to use those for business schools. So our first principle is the journey matters. And when we talk about the journey matters, we mean that every business school, whether it's the top 10 business school in the world, or whether it has just opened its doors to students, is on a journey. And that journey is your heritage, where you've come from, the innovations you've done, the research you've done, your market, your context, your nationality. And you take that into where we are now, what we're doing right now, and then that in turn informs where we're going in the future. And what we say is that the journey really matters. And part of why it matters is to do with context. And really, we can't talk about context in March 2022 without talking about the elephant in the room, COVID. And it's interesting because this is where I had my slide when I arrived in Pakistan. But I listened to my colleagues yesterday and I became inspired. And I thought, perhaps we shouldn't be thinking of it as the elephant in the room, but perhaps it's the bull in the china shop. And I don't know if that idiom translates, but essentially, bull, china shop, bad idea. Okay, the china gets broken. And in some ways, that's what COVID has been like. In March 2020, as we all know, the world stopped in a great many sense. Countries closed borders, businesses closed their doors, and in universities, teaching and learning went online. And it was a very difficult time, and it really did feel that somebody had just come in and broken up everything we hold dear. And then I thought a little more, and I thought, well, we're not in any way reducing the negative side of COVID and the very difficult and traumatic time it's been. But it also reminded me of the Japanese concept of Kinsugi. And for Kinsugi, what it means really, it's the Japanese art where they use gold or another precious metal to repair broken pottery. And the idea is rooted in the Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi, which essentially means finding beauty in perfection. And the idea is that something which seems an accident and that breaks what we hold dear can, if we take care, be repaired to become something more precious and more perfect. And that's the idea I want to use when we talk about the journey matters and we talk about digitalization. It's to think about, yes, it's been challenging, yes, there's been many things, but in the beginning of the pandemic, all our reactions were emergency responses. We did what we had to do to keep the show on the road. But as time went on, and as our learning evolved, and as we became used to doing different things and we got used to blended technologies, what we did is we started to learn from those practices and we started to become a little more reflective about what we're doing. Whoops. Gone too far. And as in doing this, we had some trends that arose from COVID-19. So what are the good things that we saw coming out of the pandemic? Well, the higher education institutes and the International Association of Universities, one of the things they've said, am I holding this? It's going backwards instead of forwards. There we go. So one of the things they said is that digitalization, that the move to distance or blended learning was one of the most transformational impacts of the pandemic. And in fact, some research done by the International Association of Universities, which was published in the last couple of months, says that 89% of higher education institutions now offer remote teaching and learning in some shape or form. That is up 22 percentage points from the middle of 2020. In the middle of 2020, it was 67%. So the first trend we see is that many, many more universities and higher education institutes are using blended learning. What I think is more interesting again is the research that's been done by the Association of MBAs and the Business Graduates Association. And they surveyed 500 or 600 higher education institutes across the entire world. And what they found is that 84% of respondents want their universities or their institutions and their business schools particularly to keep the technology that was implemented during the pandemic. Now, you might think that that means 16% said don't, but you'd be wrong. The other 16% said we want you to keep some of the technology that we implemented during the pandemic. But there was not any institution or any respondent that said we wanted to go back and get rid of the technology. And then finally, it's slightly different, but it ties into some of the information we heard yesterday. In the first quarter of 2020, Coursera, one of the big online platforms, gained 5 million new users. More importantly, there was 530,000 students who gained an advanced or intermediate level certification using Coursera on campus. So these are the kind of trends that really tell us from a context perspective, this isn't going away. There's only one way forward. And I heard my esteemed colleague, Dr. Naveed, say earlier about adaptability. There is only one choice. We have to adapt, we have to learn, we have to move forward. And the journey matters really means that we have a responsibility to hold ourselves accountable, to understand our context, where we sit, and it doesn't matter whether your school is in Pakistan or whether it's in the United States of America or it's at the North Pole, quite frankly. You are where you are, it is your context. And that you have to understand where you are, what your context is, and then how you're going to use that going forward into the journey forward. And that's essentially our first principle. Okay. Thank you. Again, I continue to be inspired by everybody I've heard, and thank you so much for your attention, because much of what's in this next slide I have heard iterated by many of the faculty I've spoken to, by Dr. Naveed, by my colleagues yesterday when they spoke. And this is the idea that I have under the triangle of excellence. So within the triangle of excellence, QED says that every business school at its core has to have this triumvirate of strength. And any quality business school that wants to have impact, and again, impact, another word we heard yesterday, has to grow their business schools in a sustainable way. And part of this means having to have a triangle of excellence. Triangle of excellence. At the top we have the degree programs and the students that go into those degree programs. Those degree programs produce graduates for two key reasons. One, of course, is to produce degree graduates that are fit to work in industry, that have the business skills and the knowledge and the awareness that are required to work in industry. And the second is that those graduates need to have an academic rigour and a really strong academic training that not only can drive into business but also can allow us to develop our next generation of researchers and academics, because we need both. It's not all one, we need both. In the bottom corner we've got the research area and the faculty. And these are important because going back towards degree programs, good degree programs are built on academic rigour. And academic rigour is driven by qualified and experienced faculty members and researchers who understand academia and understand concepts and can drive those concepts back into education. Equally, we have a really important thing, and I think we saw it with, we've seen it mentioned in several of the talks, but how important it is that our researchers and our faculty are also connected to business and understand business and can actually help businesses to solve business problems. And if you don't have both, then you are out of balance and you are not going to move forward. And finally, on the third corner, we've got the executive education and practice engagement. Really what I mean here is industry. And we rely on industry. As information into degree programs, we rely on industry to tell us the skills that they need, what's required in industry, and it's important to communicate with industry and to make sure that our degree programs remain relevant to everything we do. And equally, our industries rely on our faculty and our researchers in order to let them know the business problems that are there, to engage with them for solutions, looking to seek to them for additional education. The bottom line is that all 3 points, there must be a sustained interrelation between each point on the triangle. And if any point of that relationship is missing, then you're in trouble. Now, this does relate to digitalization, and you might be asking me why. But it's really important about the way it relates to digitalization, because when we talk about blended learning does not happen in a vacuum. It happens in the wider context of the entire business school ecosystem. So if we're talking about blended learning, we have to extend our mind from the classroom to the wider implications and how that implicates each point of the triangle and how we can use and optimize our resources in our context to drive the journey forward. So I pulled together some examples, and look, there are many, many examples we could do here, but I've just pulled together a few. The first one I picked because I was reading the NBAC report from 2019-2020, and by the way, if there's anybody from NBAC here, kudos, a really excellent report, very, very informative. But one of the things it said in that report was it talked about how important it is for business schools to look at diversity, and they wanted diversity and inclusivity to be a high priority objective. I've had some initial conversations with schools, particularly in the UK, the United Kingdom, and the anecdotal information coming back from there was that one of the unexpected benefits of the pandemic is that it has started to close the attainment gap between ethnic minority group students and the wider student population. So this idea of having additional flexibility in the learning, additional flexibility through blended learning, in the way we create our degree programmes, the way faculty and research impacts into that, could actually help us to reach out and improve inclusivity and improve outcomes for students. It's very strong. And my thought is this is anecdotal information. We need research on this, because to understand how it works and to understand how it works in different contexts, it's important for researchers to think about the pedagogical scholarship and to think about perhaps how can we use this and how can we research this to continue to deliver even stronger outcomes. The other piece I'm going to reference very quickly in relation to this side of the triangle is a business school that I've worked with before in Russia, in Skolkovo. And Skolkovo, it's a very well-developed school in many respects, but it has a lot of challenges around faculty. And during the pandemic, similar to many other schools, they took a step change in how they evolved their technology and their blended learning. And for the school in Skolkovo, it was a little different to many schools. Once the schools were allowed to open their doors, the degree programme students came back on campus, but the faculty stayed remote. And they're using this technology because they have some adjunct faculty that are international. And they're now using and beginning to use this model to actually build the diversity of their faculty structure. One of their big challenges is actually getting international faculty. And that's going to continue to be a problem. In fact, it's going to be a very severe problem for them for many reasons. But in a country like Pakistan, where there can be geopolitical unrest, there can be socio-economic conditions, it can also, like many other countries, sometimes be difficult to attract faculty for more than a visiting position. Perhaps being innovative, another word we heard a lot of yesterday, perhaps thinking outside of the box and looking at whether it's possible to develop an alternative faculty model where you have a core faculty member that is not resident in Pakistan, that is actually resident somewhere else but is committed to your school. So a little step beyond the visiting professor. So just a thought to leave you with, or something to work with. If I look across the bottom and the connections between research and faculty and between the industry, there are so many things we could talk about here. But actually the bits I'm going to really just focus on quickly. Executive education programs, we mentioned that yesterday. An obvious place to expand, an obvious place we can use our digital platforms to expand further. And yesterday we talked a little bit about micro-credentials. We mentioned the word MOOCs, massive open online programs and courses, was bandied around. But perhaps what might be more relevant to think about would be SPOCs, the small private online courses. Is there space for a school like Bahria Business School to develop very specific online courses that could be kept digitally, that could be used as an online programme to attract and bring in more and more industry in, particularly in cutting-edge areas. And you've such a strong research faculty here that there's a real opportunity perhaps to deliver something there that might be attractive. The other areas I'm going to quickly talk about there, dissemination of research. We talked over and over again about how research is wonderful and it's important to have our peer-reviewed journals. However, if research doesn't ultimately lead to a change in business, it becomes irrelevant very quickly. So again, how can we use our new technological platforms to better aid the dissemination of research? How do we build online communities with our alumni and with the industries we're connected with, and use those online communities to develop and bring more business? And then finally, commercial partnerships. And again, this is something that actually one of the conversations yesterday triggered for me. Every school, every industry has its strengths and its challenges. And there is a saying in England called "Jack of all trades, master of none." You need to think about what is it you're good at and where should you outsource. And perhaps now more than ever, there's a real opportunity to partner with appropriate industries, perhaps in the technology sector, where you bring the academia and the pedagogy and the content, and they perhaps can provide a platform and some of the audience. That maybe it doesn't all have to be within the school. Maybe the time has come when we look at those commercial partnerships, which of course, like any partnership, can then be leveraged in other ways to bring other benefits and bring other relationships closer. And then finally, very quickly, and I'm conscious of my time, but I don't have long to go, I promise. We're looking at how industry feeds into degree programmes and into our programmes that we run with our students. And very importantly there, obviously we're going to use our digital technology to supplement physical events. And even coming through the campus over the last couple of days, I see that you've got a notice up outside one of the buildings, the one next door, for the virtual jobs fair. So that's the kind of obvious use of technology that's really useful. But it's also important to think about how we leverage our technology to build industry projects. Can we use virtual connections and perhaps even our international connections with our classes in Bahria and with industry to have a project team, a virtual project team that involves students from Bahria University and from a partner university working together on maybe a project that's been co-developed by faculty, and then working with a live industry project. And again, this relies on the initiatives of faculty, of very clever and intelligent people in the international office like Dr. Awes to help make it work. But these are the kind of things that we need to think we can use the technology for. And yes, they take work, but they're all possible. And the benefits here, you've got additional connections with industry, but you could also deepen and actually further integrate your international connections, of which you have many. So really what we're saying here very quickly is blended learning doesn't happen in a vacuum, nor does digitalization or any hybrid version. So the question is, how are we keeping the triangle of excellence balanced to optimize the opportunities we have for sustainable and impactful growth? And that's really the question I'll leave you with on the second principle. And our final principle is a little easier one, and again, everything connects. What everything connects says that every business school, every establishment is based on a mission, and that mission drives the vision, drives your values, and drives your strategy. And what we say in QED is that if your business school is a solid business school, and if it is being strategic and growing, it means that nothing happens in your school unless it is linked with your mission. It doesn't matter whether you're the computer team, whether you're faculty, whether you're students, whether you're other stakeholders externally. Everything that happens, everything that you do every day should contribute to your mission and to your strategy. And so it is with digitalization and blended learning. If we think about how that happens, we think about if we're going to have blended learning and expand our blended learning, we need to make sure that our IT teams are resourced to build the technology, that our faculty and our students are educated to use the technology. We want our internationalisation teams and our internationalisation to also be thinking about how can we use the technology? What difference does it make to our strategy? We want our research teams to be thinking, how can we use this technology? But whatever happens and whatever you do, everything connects. So the question you have to say is, what implications does digitalisation have for every facet of the business school operations in line with our overall mission? Because only by doing that and by following these principles is it possible to have this idea of a sustained, impactful growth in terms of your business school. So I'll finish by saying thank you in my native language. Garibh Mila Magat.
Thank you, Ms. Joanne. May I please request Director General Islamabad Campus, Rear Admiral Retired, Naveed Ahmad Rizvi, Hilal-e Imtiaz Military, to deliver his vote of thanks.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable Chief Guest Sardar Yasir Ilyas Khan, CEO Centaurus and former President of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce, our respected guests, distinguished guests from other universities, senior management, national and international invited speakers, respected guests, faculty and students, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. As we draw curtain on this important international conference on emerging challenges for organizations in developing economies, I would like to express my profound gratitude to all the participants in making this event a success. A success not only because we had a number of participants and delegates from within and outside Pakistan, but because we have been able to highlight and discuss important challenges faced by the developing economies from various perspectives and recommending feasible measures to overcome the identified challenges. It was indeed very heartening to see that some very complex problems, especially in the wake of the pandemic, has surfaced and which has hit the economies, and some very prudent solutions have been put forward. Ladies and gentlemen, recent times have witnessed multiple economic recessions globally, especially due to this pandemic, and economies once thriving are seen in financial turmoils. Consequently, deploying strategies to turn the tides in their favor, there have been tremendous efforts, and as an overall, the mankind has done pretty well in fighting this, and Pakistan in particular needs, I think, a lot of appreciation that we have had not comparatively, not as much as casualties, both in the people and also in the businesses. As the conference ends, now this is the question, where do we stand, as Dr. Joanne has said, and where do we want to go? So what next? So the next is, I believe, that we should summarize all what we have gathered, and we should translate that into actions, and then I think it would be meaningful. I won't take much time then. Before concluding my remarks, I would like again to thank our Honorable Chief Guest, Mr. Sardar Yasir Ilyas, for sparing your valuable time, sir, and it is a lot of encouragement, especially for the students. I would also like to make a thanks for the respectable guest participants and delegates, and also to our partner, International Research Universities, for their gracious presence and contributions. I would also like to appreciate the efforts of the ECODE organizing team and congratulate them on successful conduct of the conference. A lot of effort has been put in by the business school and also by the international office. And I truly appreciate that they have been exceptional in having this thing done in a very professional manner. And of course, before we depart, I would like to make special mention of our international speakers from Ireland, from Netherlands, from UK and Poland, who spared time to share their expertise with us. I realize that you have been fully dedicated to the conference sessions and discussions, and you have really brought a very international flavor and also quality flavor to this overall conference. So we are indebted as a nation, as an organization, as a university, and each of our students is indebted. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our chief guest, Sardar Yasir Ilyas, CEO, Centaurus Islamabad, for his address. Sardar Yasir Ilyas.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Our Honorable Dean of the school, business school, our distinguished guests, our speakers, faculty members, students, members of the business community, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. Firstly, I'd like to thank our team of the business school and the international team which has extended this invitation. It's a pleasure being here amongst you all. I've had the pleasure of being here many times, perhaps not in the auditorium so much, but more on the board level, and perhaps we've had a number of sessions and I've exchanged with our visiting faculty. I'd like to extend my congratulations to all of you. I'm extremely proud of the faculty and the university in particular, because you probably have one of the most proactive exchange programs in which you get to experience an international perspective simply because of the effort which is being made by the school here, or by the university. It's a blessing. The reason I say it's a blessing is because, you know, I'd like to firstly thank you for making the effort and traveling all the way down to Pakistan. Now that we know COVID is officially over in one way or another, it's going to be part of our life. It's like a flu shot. You know, you get a flu and life goes on. So consider COVID as a flu. Life has to go on. Look, the one thing I'd like for everyone to look at is, you know, there's a statement from Sylvester Stallone, a famous actor. He said this in his movie once, and it directly correlates with Pakistan. He said, it's not about how hard you can hit. It's how hard you can get hit, take the impact, fall down, get back up and keep moving forward. And Pakistan completely resonates with that. Pakistan has been hit time and time again on a number of different accounts. If you look at 2008, we won't go beyond that. If you look at 2008, the crisis, the financial crisis which hit the world, and then obviously you look at the recession, and you look at the floods, you look at the earthquake which was prior to that, and obviously we've had terrorism issues and instability, social issues, economic issues, and there's multiple factors. So Pakistan hasn't been hit once. It hasn't been hit in the same place. It's been hit all across in every sector, in every domain, and yet we're still here. We're still standing proud, standing tall, and we're moving forward. So before I start engaging, I want to ask you guys a couple of questions, because I realize some of you must have fallen asleep, because usually in this time of the afternoon after lunch, we need to wake everybody up. So let me ask those of you, how many of you are planning on traveling abroad after you're done your graduates and your MBAs or masters, whatever you're doing? How many of you want to travel abroad? So can I say 10% of the room, more, 20%? 30%? All right, I need to ask you, why? Are you now planning to travel overseas for better opportunities? Is that what it is? That's it? Better pays? Higher income? Or are you looking for a significant other, a nice person you want to get married to overseas? All right. Look, the reason I'm asking this, I've been all over, and we obviously have visiting faculty here. I've been all around the world. I've grown up overseas. And look, I've come back to Pakistan. I'm a very proud Pakistani. I have a Pakistani passport. And I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something. There's a saying, the grass always looks greener on the other side. Every country has its own dynamics. When we're talking about the emerging countries, emerging economies, and the challenges, each one has its own. We don't have the right to criticize, but we have the right to learn from them. And I'll tell you the one thing which is common amongst all global economies. They're all moving towards globalization. This is especially those developing countries, developing economies. We need to globalize. So the concept of think global, act local applies everywhere. It's all about the success is going to go to those that get there first. The first mover advantage. That is the bottom line. So as Pakistan, we compare ourselves with the emerging countries such as Bangladesh, we look at Sri Lanka, we look at Central Asia, and we also look at India, our direct competitor. And obviously China is way ahead of us, but we look at them as well. And why do we look at them? In terms of scale, we're similar in terms of our landmass. Obviously India has a much bigger population, but the others, when you look at Bangladesh and you look at Sri Lanka, we're similar. In terms of land mass, guys, we're huge. Guess how big Pakistan is? Let me get some numbers here. Social studies, guys. How big is Pakistan? 880,000 square kilometers. That's huge. If you compare that with Bangladesh, only 100,000 something. If you look at the population size, 227 million people as of today. The one thing we're really fast and really good at is exponential population growth. So it's going to add to our advantage, and I'll tell you why. Do you know how inexpensive Pakistan is? We're far more inexpensive than China and Bangladesh and India. I look at the numbers. The current per capita GDP in Bangladesh is about $2,200. India is $1,900. Pakistan is about $1,200. So that makes it ideal. Pakistan is far cheaper. It's not a good thing. I mean, inflation is going up, and we've got issues in terms of costs, and this, standards of life have improved, but at the same time, our pays don't correlate with that. So the other flip side is companies globally would want to outsource their businesses to Pakistan because Pakistan is far more cheaper. I say inexpensive. So why not? Why not capitalize on it? Why not benefit from this? So for those of you that are looking to go overseas, my recommendation would be not to sell yourself cheap. That's exactly what I'm saying, that they're going to consider you as cheap human resource, which you're not. I promise you you're not. The talent in this country is phenomenal, and yet we underestimate ourselves. I'll give you an example. I went to the Blue Area at Watson about 2 years ago, midnight, 12 o'clock. Didn't have any driver, nothing, drove myself. I got out of the car, there was a gentleman trying to sell me something. I didn't pay attention, I had to go in there, get a medicine, came back, he's still standing there. And he's handicapped. So I gave him something, which is what we do. We're one of the most giving nations. Are we not? We are. And we're very proud of it. So, ED Foundation, CSR, we've got a number of examples we can give you. We probably had set an example around the world that we're one of the most, contributing economies when it comes to CSR. So I gave him something, got back to my car, and he knocked on the window, and he said, "Sir, ye aap le le mujhse." मैंने कहा मुझे पता ही नहीं है कि size क्या है इसका. I don't want it. I don't know what size it is. He was selling undergarments. I said, just keep what I've given you. He said, no. If you don't take this, मैं आपके पैसे वापस कर रहा हूँ. That is honor, dignity, self-respect. I stopped for a second and I said, let me offer this guy a job. I loved the way he showed his willingness to for dignity and self-respect. So I said, do you want a job? He said, can you get me hired in the police department? Look at his patriotism. He wants to serve the nation. I said, I'm sorry, that I cannot do. You're handicapped and I don't have the contacts to get you employed there. Would you like to work in the private sector? He said, how much are you going to pay me? I said, how much do you want? He said, I'm earning 30,000 rupees a month, 2 years ago, 30,000 rupees a month selling undergarments on the street being handicapped. That is the capability of one single human being who is underprivileged and doesn't have the education that he needs, doesn't have the tools that he needs. Yet he's earning 30,000, which is way above the minimum wage, which is 20,000 rupees today. So tell me, are we inexpensive? Are we poor? Are we incapable in any way? No, we're not. You just need to follow these people. So we're very privileged. Look at those that are underprivileged. And that's how you can appreciate your life. And again, when we talk about the academics, system that we have when we look at Bahria University, and we have fantastic universities here in Islamabad, alhamdulillah, we've got NAST, we've got Air University right next to you. If you look at them, we have all the enabling things that you need to succeed in life. You have all the tools, utilize them. You have an excellent faculty, a faculty that has the experience. You have visiting faculties from overseas that can tell you about the global economies, global trends, but use that time, because once you get to my stage when you're working in life, you can't come back to education again. It's very rare. The executive programs are there, but finding that time from your business, your personal life, personal commitments, your married life, and your children is like doing jihad. I'm telling you, it's a fact. So utilize this time. The one thing that we all spend and we cannot buy back, it's time. So cherish it. And the reason I'm telling you this is the literacy rate for Pakistan is shocking. We're only about 56, 57%, guys. That's shocking. मेरी अपनी ख्वाहिश होती है मैं उर्दू में तकरीर करूँ कि खान साहब ये चाहते हैं ताकि हम बता सकें उर्दू भी आती है, लेकिन since this is an international platform, I want to be bilingual. Kashmir, I went there for my brother's campaign this summer. I went to Bal, one place which is very remote, up in the mountains. You know how the roads are. Most areas don't have roads, and yet the kids are still walking on these, this rough terrain, and they're going to school. Guess what the literacy rate is for AJK? About 67, 68%. So guys, with all of these resources in Pakistan, the AJK literacy rate is still higher. So we have to take advantage of these things. We need to be able to make with what we have and move forward. So these tools, use them because we've moved forward, especially when we talk about COVID-19. The academia went online. So nothing stops. Life does not stop. There's going to be challenges. The one thing I want to leave you with today, amongst the other things I'm going to say, is consider and accept every challenge as an opportunity. It's extremely important. It'll help you overcome all the challenges in life. The one thing that my team knows very strongly about my personality, about my character, is I don't believe in the word impossible. It's the way you look at things, perspective. And I want you to write it down someday. Impossible. Create a space between I and am. I am possible. Am I not possible, guys? I am possible. I can make it happen. Have faith. Have firm belief in yourself and your team. And the reason I talk about the team is there's no such thing as a one-man island. There never can be. It has to be a team effort. It has to be in collaboration. I say the same thing in business, which is what makes us successful. The one thing you need to understand about business is all about networking. It's who you know, how. I'm not talking about the politics. I'm not talking about the influences, manipulation. I'm not talking about that. It's the connectivity. If I know somebody in a certain sector, I can capitalize from that. I know everyone there is that's relevant to my field in Pakistan and beyond. If we're talking about real estate development, there's about 50, 60 allied industries. Imagine how much benefit there will be for any of us that are working there and who knows the owners. I can call the owner up directly and be like, listen, I'm doing something. Can you help me out in this? Absolutely, they will, because I know them. So the connectivity, so mutual growth, mutual respect is first and foremost. Don't be ruthless. This is stuff we hear. There are businessmen that are ruthless, but they're looking at the short term. I look at the long term. The legacy, and you want to leave a positive legacy behind. What you're contributing to the economy, what you're contributing to your community, what you're leaving behind, the relationships that we make along the way. These are essential fundamentals for long-term sustainable, successful development, sustainable economic development. So when we go to Pakistan, there's a lot of things. I want to focus on Pakistan because there's a lot of areas, sectors that are overlooked. The one thing I want you to all understand, consider yourselves when you're looking at employment in the long run. We don't want to create job seekers in Pakistan. We want people who can create jobs. Job creators is more important. I see a lot of entrepreneurs every single day. We had a women economic development program, women economic empowerment program just 2 days ago with the Women's Chamber of Commerce, and they had set up about 100 stalls, 190 stalls in F9 Park just over the weekend. And it was phenomenal to see how many women had come from Hunza, from Sindh, from Bhalpur, and they're doing all these arts and crafts, specialized items, which you won't find on any of the high streets here because it's a certain skill set. I found, I don't know if many of the generation know this, but we used to make these dolls, which we used to call guddas and goodies. These beautiful handmade, handcrafted dolls, the level of detail. If I sell these on the high street in London, I could probably sell them for about 200 pounds, where they were selling here for about 5 pounds. And this sort of stuff needs to get online. This sort of stuff needs to move forward into the global markets, and that's going to happen through e-commerce. I doubt I can connect them with Asda and Tesco's, but the only way to do that is to be able to connect them online. So e-commerce is fundamental. Don't miss that. This is especially applicable to those that are underprivileged in remote communities. We're talking about Aptabad, we're talking about KPK, Swat, Azad Kashmir. So e-commerce is the future. And for that, I can give you an example. Look at Baikia. I know the owner. Baikia came out of nowhere. Airlift came out of nowhere. Daraz is Chinese owned, but it's a business that's working in Pakistan. Why have we not been able to make a parallel Daraz company in Pakistan? It's easily doable. We know the retailers, we know all the brands. It's just about taking the initiative. We have a number of companies in I-9 doing software exports, software development for companies in the US. Because most of the companies in Pakistan don't know about the capability. We have about 2,000 software companies registered with Pakistan Software Export Board, and most people don't know about them. So connectivity. And the one thing I really appreciate the university that is trying to do with bringing people like me and others, my counterparts, into the university, the one bridge which we can form for you is the link between academia and industry. That's what's been missing in the past. So the curriculum and the programs are designed around the needs of today's markets, today's corporations. And there's a huge influx coming in, guys. These numbers really matter. It shows you the confidence in the country, and obviously the other countries, the other developing nations are going to follow suit and probably doing something similar. Do you know how many companies have been registered with SECP over the last 3-4 years, since 2018? Take a guess. 69,000 companies have been incorporated in SECP since the last 3 years, 4 years. It's huge. So in terms of SMEs, Pakistan's backbone, every country's backbone should be or is based on SMEs. We're looking at about 4.2 million SMEs operating in Pakistan as of now. That's a huge number. They're contributing to about 40% of Pakistan's GDP, but it's still a small number. I foresee these going up to about 60-70%. Pakistan's GDP contribution is shockingly odd. We're based on services. We're not a service-oriented country. We should be a manufacturing country. And other markets are capitalizing on this. Now, I'll give you an example. We talked about CPEC. I think you talked about CPEC yesterday. Let me give you the other side of CPEC. Everybody talks about how we can benefit from it and how great it is. The infrastructure is being built. The Belt and Road Initiative is taking place. But Pakistan will only come out as a winner if Pakistan jumps onto this roller coaster. It's exactly what the professor said. We discussed this a couple of months ago. I thank you again, sir, for coming to Pakistan. It's always a pleasure seeing you. Guys, what is the biggest manufacturer of tiles in Pakistan? Master Tiles, right? They're huge. Their facilities over 300 acres in Gujarat, Gujranwala. I met with them and I said, why aren't you guys exporting? They said, we're not able to meet the local needs. Everything we make sells out in Pakistan. I then went to Bhalwal, and in Bhalwal, they have the latest high-tech Chinese manufacturing facility of tiles, ceramics, by a company called Oriel. It took them about 3 years. They spent about $70, $80, $90 million, and they set up this really techy plant. Their tile quality, don't quote me on this, is actually better than Master Tiles. And I'm looking at this as an end user, as a client. So if they're manufacturing in Pakistan, they're not just manufacturing in Pakistan for Pakistan. They're actually going to be exporting this tile through Pakistan via Kasimport, via Gwadar. And they're going to be capitalizing this. Why? Because now there's a trade war. Tariffs have come into play. So Chinese are not going to be exporting to China anymore. They're actually going to route through Pakistan, and guess what? 90% of the management working in that factory was from China. So we need to ensure that, one, we do JVs with them, so our stake is attached with them. Employment, 80% or 70% employment should be from Pakistan because they have the skilled labor. And they're very good when it comes to being efficient. We need to learn from that. We need to capitalize on that. We need to ensure the transfer of technology comes to Pakistan from various economies. And these are developed economies I'm talking about, not developing countries. We need to get them from developed countries so they already have the tried and tested models. It's very simple, guys. There's two types of innovation: incremental and breakthrough. Pakistan doesn't need a breakthrough. We don't need to revolutionize something from, if you've got an idea, a crazy idea, awesome, fantastic. It's a blessing for us. Not everyone can be an Einstein, but the reason I'm talking about incremental, you take an existing idea, improve upon it, and apply in Pakistan exactly what you said. Take a broken art and craft, put gold into it, become something completely new. That's what Pakistan needs. Think global, act local. So look at what McDonald's does globally. McDonald's has a completely different menu for every country they operate in. So Pakistan can adapt so many different models, so many different ideas, which are already tried and tested and successfully applied worldwide, just applied back in Pakistan. We're huge in terms of growth. When I talk about 227 million people, we are a volume-based country. We need to focus on the consumer markets, focus on the masses, and that's how we're going to grow, we're going to excel. Exports. Nobody's focusing on exports. We need to focus on exports. Our current exports don't correlate with our size or our numbers. We're talking about 25 billion. Bangladesh is doing 49 billion. So I'm surprised at this. Why can't we work on agriculture? Why can't we work on IT, guys? IT is hardly touching $1 billion or 1.5. They're targeting $3 billion this year, but $1.5 billion is an achievement. India is exporting $136 billion worth of IT software. So what are we doing? We need to market ourselves. And the faculty that is here, I really appreciate the fact that you made your time to come down. You're going to go back with a different perspective of Pakistan. Unfortunately, the media is very different, the global media as a whole, as our former President Trump used to say, fake news. And in a lot of ways, I think that applies to us as well, that what you see on TV does not correlate with what is actually happening on ground. Pakistan is a very stable country. It has a very stable future. I don't believe in politics at all. If you talk to any businessman, he doesn't care. The only thing he cares about is a national interest. Because if the country excels, we excel with it. If the country grows, we grow with it. So our focus is the national interest. There's nothing more important than that. And the only political party that anyone should support is a political party that is working for Pakistan, not for themselves or for self-interest or self-projection or anything like that. That's the bottom line. So we should never talk about politics, never be political. Be professional. Be sincere to yourself, be sincere to your country, because this country is who you are. It's what you made you. Everyone keeps asking कि मुल्क ने हमें क्या दिया. मैं पूछ रहा हूँ कि आप भी कभी पूछ लें कि आपने मुल्क को क्या दिया. You know, we keep going back to the IMF program. But do you know why we're getting the IMF program, guys? We're all business students. Two aspects. The trade deficit. From every country I've interacted with, we're importing more than we're exporting. So there's a trade deficit with every country, almost. The other problem is there's a fiscal deficit. Our budget does not correlate with our revenue generation from FBR. Currently, our budget is 8,400 billion this year. But our revenue collection targeted is about 6,000 billion. From people like me who are already paying tax, we're going to pay more. So technically, our net tax, which we're paying in Pakistan, is about 50%, pretty similar to the UK. The issue with that is it's still not an ideal enabling environment. So we're talking about corporate governance, and we're talking about the governance in the government bodies, which applies to nearly all of these developing countries. All of them have these issues. Corruption, manipulation, you know, moving files unofficially. That happens in most of these countries that I've dealt with, interacted with in the past. The issue is we need to regularize these things, restructure, have reforms. So we need to encourage people to pay taxes. Anyone that is not paying taxes, guys, as concerned civic citizens of Pakistan, we should raise a bell. I'm currently working on organizing a conference with FBR and all the relevant sectors, from retail to real estate development to IT commerce, encouraging everybody to, you know, put their contribution forward. Mulk khud nahi banega, qaumein mulk banati hain. The government gives policy, but the countries are made with the people of Pakistan, or the people of any country. If you look at Switzerland, you go to the nicest mountains in the 80s, 60s, unki wo tasveerein nazar aati hain in which we're wearing undergarments at 11,000 feet doing those tunnels, in which we go see all these beautiful mountains in those trains. So qaumein apne mulk mein khud kaam karti hain. Agar hum ye expect karenge hame koi aake Pakistan bana ke dega, it's never going to happen. So for those of you looking to go overseas, aap logon ne kal shaadiyon ke liye wapas Pakistan hi aana hai, khushi ghami ke liye aap logon ne Pakistan hi aana hai, doston ke liye aap logon ne Pakistan hi aana hai, aur dafan bhi hum isi mulk mein honge. Guys, Centaurus was the icon of Islamabad, and it is still the icon of Pakistan, and I'm very proud of it because it is the most complicated project. I spent a 4-hour meeting this morning trying to do the extension part of it. It's a very tricky project, so that's why you keep seeing this ongoing construction, because we're still expanding. We're still adding a 5-star hotel this year. We're still adding a shopping mall, more retail. And tourism is another point you guys missed out on. Guys, tourism. Guess how much Dubai generated from tourism in 2019 prior to COVID? About $28 billion in tourism. UK, I think, was about 110 billion pounds in 2019. It's a lot of money in tourism. It's huge. And Pakistan is not even at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to tourism. We have all the 4 seasons. We have the most diverse range from Karachi to, if you go to Gwadar, sunlight, beaches, you can get a sunstroke. The same day you travel to Islamabad, Swat, 11,000 feet, best snowfall, -5 degrees, in which country can you get that kind of a contrast? How many countries do you have like that? We need to capitalize on this. So I talk about Centaurus. So we're still developing. We're adding a 5-star hotel, inshallah, towards the end of this year, opening, inshallah. We're very hopeful. We're adding new restaurants, adding another shopping mall component. So everything that we earned, we were foreign investors. We spent about $500 million that came in from the State Bank of Pakistan into Centaurus, developed it, got the money back, and now we're reinvesting into Taj Residencia, another huge urban planned community. But why are we doing that? Because we have faith in Pakistan. We have faith in its future. We are Pakistanis. We're never going to get this recognition anywhere else in the world. It's who we are. If we cannot add value with all of this exposure and education into our own country, then it is of no use. The other thing I want to add with regards to coming back home and adding value, guys, construction, another huge sector. Can you imagine कि आज जो घरों की requirement है कितनी है? खान साहब कहते हैं 50 लाख घर. अभी जो इस्लामाबाद पिंडी में project हो रहे हैं, guys, they're contributing about 250 billion rupees. इतनी contribution है cash की. So 6 billion IMF program is a joke for Pakistan. 6 billion Pakistani आपको businessmen दे देंगे यहाँ से. The question is how you take it. Trust deficit is there. We need to close the trust deficit. So with all of these allied sectors, with all these innovations, interior design companies, VR, virtual reality companies, architecture firms, companies that can work on furniture. Every furniture item that I see right now is being imported. आप जिस showroom में जाएं, DHM में जाएं, GT Road पे जाएं, यहाँ पे जाएं, it's all from Turkey and it's all from China. And I'm shocked at this because we have some of the most skilled craftsmen, the furniture that we have in Pakistan. I get Pakistani furniture and I get imported furniture, and I look at ours and I'm saying, guys, a bed that we make in Pakistan, a proper solid wood bed, if I were to sell this bed in the UK, it'd probably be about 8,000 pounds. If I do the same bed in Pakistan, it's about 2,000 pounds. Look at the difference. Because I'm inexpensive, but we're not promoting ourselves. We're capitalizing. मैं इसलिए example देता हूँ. Automation is the future. This is where we're lacking. मुझे 2,000 doors चाहिए थे. I need 2,000 doors for my upcoming project. I went to Interwood. Interwood has the largest automated facility in Lahore. Even they couldn't supply me with the doors I needed. I needed minimum 30-minute firefighting rated, and I needed about 40 dB sound insulation. ताकि bed तक hotel में आवाज ना आए. They couldn't do it. They said, I'm sorry, spec पे बना नहीं रहे, because there's not many projects that are doing it, so I understand that. So at the end of the day, I have to go abroad for that. Now that's a loss for me. तो जो चीज़ मुझे पाकिस्तान में मिल सकती है, why not? But for that, any sector that any of you are working on or thinking about working in, go with a need-based model. Don't just say कि इसकी ज़रूरत है. Find out from the industry कि वाकई इसकी ज़रूरत है. That's a business. The minute you find a gap in the market, that is where you can create an impact. And the other thing that Dr. Saab mentioned, I want to leave you with also, is being unleashed. So coming into the global program, I'm also on the board of ISOI, International School of Islamabad. And it is part of a huge hub. I mean, I went to Darwin Academy in Saudi Arabia, the Association of American Schools, and this is a part of that. So when you're part of a global platform, exactly why we've done the hotel and we've signed it with Moonpig, because we're part of a global network. It allows you global outreach. You're able to learn from the world. So there's no harm in that. I always tell everyone, become global citizens. I grew up with 188 different nationalities. You learn so much. You learn, you appreciate, and you don't forgo your own values. There's no harm, but it makes you a global citizen, it makes you a stronger player, it makes you a better human being. One more thing, guys, remember this. This is a really important concept in business. Emotional intelligence. I'll keep going on and talking, but I don't want to get too late. Emotional intelligence is a topic which I did in my thesis in strategic management. It's really important. It not just makes you a good businessman, it makes you a good human being. So there's some basic principles. Self-awareness. Know who you are. Know what your emotions are. Self-regularization, how you regulate those emotions and those feelings. And empathy, being empathetic towards others. Motivation skills, how you motivate others. Social skills, how you socialize with others. These are essential, and these will make you a successful businessman and a successful human being, and these should be your core values that we correlate with Islam as well. Think about your neighbors, think about others. Islam क्या कहता है? एक जान बचाएं, पूरी उम्मा बचाने के बराबर है. So that's who we are, that's what we should focus on, welfare. Siyasat ka actual maqsad welfare. So if we are doing politics, we should be focusing on other people's welfare. So guys, inshallah, on another platform, I'll digress more into details. I represent a lot of sectors. I work with the business community. The one thing I want you all to do is reach out to us. We're focusing on startups. We need to fund startups. The reason we're doing this is